Everyone, welcome to Saraswat's classes. This is Nirupam. Hope you're having a nice time. So today I will be discussing with you about the pricing of goods using market power. So we all know that there are different types of market situations: competitive market situation, monopolistic market situation, monopoly market situation. So basically today I'll be discussing about all those situations where the producer, or I mean the buyer, where the producer has some power with itself to influence the market price and set the prices depending on his profit considerations and how he would like to maximize his surplus. So typically starting with the example of the monopoly situation whereby you have an demand curve, that is a market demand curve, or which we tell as the average revenue curve. Now corresponding to this average revenue curve you have a marginal revenue curve. Okay, so you have this marginal revenue curve as well as the average revenue curve, and then you have got this marginal cost curve. Fine. So under monopoly you will be producing at that point where your marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. That means you will be producing up to that point. That means the marginal cost curve intersects the marginal revenue curve from below, and then we will be finding that what will be the corresponding price. So at the point where the marginal cost curve is intersecting the marginal revenue curve from below, then if you drop a perpendicular from the point of intersection onto the horizontal axis, we get the equilibrium quantity that is produced under monopoly as Q star. Okay, then what is happening is that then again we draw a perpendicular upwards so that it intersects the vertical line upwards, so that it intersects the average revenue curve at point A. So the corresponding price on the price axis corresponding to point A on the average revenue curve, the price is given as P star. So what is happening, we can see that in a usual monopoly situation where there is a single seller in the market, he sets for to maximize his profit marginal revenue equal to marginal cost and produces only at that point. So at that point we can see that the equilibrium quantity produced is Q star, whereas the equilibrium price is P star, corresponding to the point on the average revenue curve or the market demand curve. Now we can see that what is your the surplus. So let's say, so the cost of production in this case, if you find it, if you see that this is the cost of production, so the cost of production is being given something by this amount, that is O Q star E F. Fine. So this is the cost of production, and hence the surplus, that is the producer surplus, is given by this this rectangle, that is P star A E F. So this is the producer surplus. Now what is happening is this: if you find that till the point A, for all the units of the good till the point A on the revenue curve, and hence till equilibrium quantity produced, that is Q star, all the goods are charged the same price. That means they are charged the price of P star. But you will see that average revenue curve is denoting the marginal willingness to pay of a consumer for each unit of the good it is consuming or the market is consuming. So we can see that for all the till point A, so from first unit of output till the Q star unit of output, you will see that the marginal willingness to pay of any consumer represented by the corresponding points on the average revenue curve is at least equal to or greater than P star. So it is, so here at point A, corresponding to the Q star unit of output, the marginal willingness to pay is equal to the price that is charged by the monopolist. But for any output on the left side of Q star, or for outputs that are lesser for the units of output prior to the Q star unit of output, the marginal willingness to pay is always greater than the price which the monopolist is charging. Similarly, for any point to the right of A, or any unit of output greater than Q star unit of output, the marginal, if you look here, the marginal willingness to pay, that is on the right side along the AR curve, the marginal willingness to pay for a consumer is less than P star, and hence they don't participate in this transaction in a where there is a single seller or where we have got a monopoly situation. But there sometimes such situation arises whereby the monopolist can change its profit maximization strategy or pricing strategy. So what is the strategy? A strategy can be that, say for example, for any output up to the Q star unit of output, it can decide to charge. So since if see till point A, the marginal willingness to pay is at least equal to, if not greater than P star, so the monopolist can decide to charge for any output to the left side of A slightly higher than the monopoly equilibrium price. That means he can charge the consumer any price greater than P star, and still he will be able to sell that output because the consumer's marginal willingness to pay is obviously higher than P star. Now when we consider any point to the right of A along the AR curve till the point where it is intersecting where it is intersected by the MC curve from below, that is at point G. So at point G it is intersected by the MC curve from below. So till that point, what is happening, the marginal willingness to pay is equal to the marginal cost of producing that output. That means the incremental revenue which I will get will be that is at this point the incremental revenue which I will be getting the average revenue which or the marginal willingness to pay the marginal amount which the consumer is willing to pay will be equal to the marginal cost of producing that output. That means what is happening is this, that if I am supplying the consumer with that output, then the cost at which I am producing that output will be less than or equal to, will be less than or equal to the price which the consumer is willing to pay for that unit of output. Okay. So here also the monopolist can change his pricing strategy and can decide to operate to the right side of the point till the point G, where the average revenue curve and the marginal cost curve are intersecting, such that he extracts all the surplus that is associated. So all the consumer surplus that is associated, or all the marginal amount that the consumer is willing to pay, till it reaches the point where the marginal cost of producing that output or that particular unit of output is equal to the marginal amount the consumer is willing to pay for that output. So this brings us to the discussion of a type of price discrimination known as the first price discrimination, where we are charging a separate price, or where a monopoly is charging separate price for each unit of output it is selling in the market. That means it will now, rather than having a situation where it was producing earlier at the point where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, it will now be producing up to the point where the marginal cost curve is intersecting the average revenue curve from below, because only at that point the the variable profit, which I will say, that is a variable profit which I will be earning, will be at least, so here I am operating at this point, okay, so I will be operating up to this point. So whatever so my marginal cost of producing that output will always be less than or equal to the marginal willingness of the consumer to pay for that particular unit of output. So that means I will be paid more than what I am incurring to produce that output till I reach the point where I am equalizing what I am being paid and what I am expending or spending to produce that unit of output. So by this way, what will happen is this: it will extract all the consumer surplus that was previously being generated or associated with the consumer and will add to its profit, and then will add to its profit, amounts or the profit margin. So here what will happen is this: let's say if you're considering the first unit of output. So previously what was happening, I was charging P star, but now rather than charging P star, I'll be charging him a price corresponding to the point on the AR curve. That is, let's say this is A prime. So now rather than charging P star, I'll be now charging him P1. So for the first unit of output, now I'll be charging him P star P1 amount extra. Now next, for the second unit of output, rather than charging him P star, I will now charge him P2. So P2 P star is the extra amount that I am now charging for the second unit of output, and so on. Okay. So that is how this pricing strategy is being changed by the monopolist in terms of first degree price discrimination. So this is known as first degree price discrimination, whereby the monopolist is charging separate price for each unit of output which it is selling in the market. Now let's say it happens till it reaches the point where P star is equal to where it reaches the point Q star where P star will be exactly equal to the marginal willingness to pay of the consumer. Okay. Now the monopolist will not be stopping at it, will even go beyond the point A to the right along the AR curve, because still the marginal willingness to pay by the consumer is greater than the marginal cost of producing that output. So rather than stopping here, what will happen, it will keep on increasing the output. So it will charge exactly that amount corresponding to that point on the AR curve, okay, till it reaches the point where AR curve is equal to the marginal cost curve. Because now what is happening is this, that I am now considering the marginal willingness to pay, and hence now this becomes my benchmark for comparing with my marginal cost curve. So now I'll be producing exactly up to this point. So what is happening, rather than previously this was the profit that I was earning. So this was my variable profit that I was earning following the production. So following the production, this was the profit that I was earning, okay, under monopoly. Now rather than earning this profit, what has happened, when I'm charging different price for each unit of output that has been produced, so till point A, now my producer surplus is changing from this rectangle P star A EF to this trapezium, that is F P1 AE, okay, till Q star unit of output. In addition to that, I am adding another triangular area, that is AEG, to my profit margin or to my profit amount, because now I am not producing at Q star, but now I am producing at a point QG. So you can see clearly that under first degree price discrimination, the output that will be produced in a monopoly situation will be exactly equal to the output that is being produced in a perfect competitive situation or in a competitive market situation. However, compared to the perfect competitive situation, in case of monopoly, the consumer surplus, the inter-consumer surplus will be appropriated by the monopoly seller, and hence the consumer surplus will be zero, and this consumer surplus will then add to the profit amount or to the profit margin of the monopolist. Okay. So if you ask that what are the practical examples of such first degree price discrimination, so if I talk in a continuous sense, it is not possible, but if I talk in a discrete sense, it is possible. So let me give you an example. Let's say you are visiting a doctor. Okay, so the doctor provides consultation to the patients daily from, let's say, 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the evening. Now so now this time period, that is 4-hour time period from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. is divided into 20 minutes slot. So there will be 12 slots. So 20 minutes multiplied by 12, that is 240 minutes, which is equal to 4 hours. So there are 12 slots that are being allotted. Now what is happening is this, we know, now let us consider a weekday when this 4 hour slot is up for, these 12 slots are up for, purchase or buying by the patients who would like to visit the doctor for consultation. Now what is happening is this, depending on your professional commitments, depending on your jobs which you do, depending on the availability of the time or your convenience, you have marginal willingness to pay. So different consumers will have marginal willingness to pay for each of these slots. So what is happening is this, let's say when it is like early in the evening, that is from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. So people who are staying at home, if I see, so let's say people who are staying at home and who are not employed anywhere and who have ample time will be usually be ready to use those slots, okay, compared to the professionals or the salaried people who are usually working in office till 5 or 6 p.m. and hence they will be comfortable only with the slots beyond 6 p.m. that is from 6 to 8 onwards. Now what is happening that you can effectively, you are now able to charge different amount for these different slots depending on the time preference of the consumers. So depending on the time preference of the consumers, they will have different marginal willingness to pay for each of these time slots. So usually what will happen as the time slots that are earlier in the evening, that is from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., which will be picked up by the people who stay at home, who don't have any other professional commitment. So usually their willingness to pay will be, low, but certainly it will not be below the, the opportunity cost of the doctor. So it will be priced in such a way that it is certainly at least equal, if not greater than the opportunity cost of the doctor, but not so high so that it discourages these people from visiting him. Now post 6 p.m., that is from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., what is happening? You have got the professionals who are very hard pressed for time, and hence they will have to get ready for the next day. So they will always want the slot because this is a slot which they can avail post 6 p.m. and as usual for more number of professionals, some higher will be the demand for all the slots. So usually depending on the time preference of the the salaried professionals, each of the slots will have different, and given the time of the office and at what time the office ends, each of these professionals will have different marginal willingness to pay for each of the slots. So again, you can price each of the slots differently depending on the time preference as well as the marginal willingness of the professionals who would like to visit the doctor. So this can be an example by which you can charge different price for each of these 12 different slots, which are nothing but different units of output. So each of these 20-minute slots for consultation is equivalent to 1 unit of output. So by this way you can practice price discrimination by a doctor, or let's say by such a professional. It can also be a CA, or let's say it can also be a lawyer who also provide similar types of consultation services to their clients. Now, moving on from first price discrimination, there is another form of price discrimination which is usually being practiced. So what is that price discrimination? So another form of price discrimination is Now, moving on from first price discrimination, we can talk about another form of price discrimination whereby rather than charging different price for each unit of output that is being sold in the market, what we can do now, rather than charging for each unit of output, we can charge for different blocks of output for different quantities of output. So let's say, I'll give an example. So if you go to the market, you are buying something in the fast moving consumer goods segment. Let us take the example of something like a shampoo. Now depending on the volume of the shampoo or the size of the container which you are buying, you will see that the unit price actually varies. So let's say if you are buying a 50 ml shampoo container. So 50 ml shampoo container will be costing you something like 100 rupees. And yeah, 100 rupees. Now when you're buying, change shifting from 50 ml to let's say 100 ml shampoo. So rather than paying 200 rupees, now let's say we're paying 175 rupees. Now again moving from 100 ml to 200 ml. So rather than paying now let's say 350 rupees, now you will be paying instead 325 rupees. Now again moving from 200 ml to let's say 400 ml. So instead of paying 650 rupees, you will now be paying let's say 600 rupees. So what has happened, if you check let's say from 50 ml to 100 ml to 200 ml to 400 ml, the subsequent units, the subsequent price which you pay for per unit on a per unit basis is dropping. So this is something which is known as the some sort of a block pricing. So more volume or more quantity of output if you are buying, the unit price which you end up paying as you end up buying higher volumes of output actually falls. So effectively, let's say as you're shifting from 50 ml to let's say 100 ml. So I'll just give you an idea about it. So let's say you are moving. So this is 50 ml. Okay. Okay. So this is quantity and this is price. So 50 ml you are paying 100 rupees. 100 ml you are paying 175 rupees. 200 units you are paying 325 rupees, and 400 you are paying let's say 600 rupees. Okay. Now if you see in the incremental sense how it is changing, so it is now let's say 2 rupees per ml of shampoo. Now when you move to the next 50 units, what is happening? So for the next 50 units, your price is changing only by 75 rupees. So now you are paying for the next 50 units at the rate of 1.5 rupees per unit. Now, as you are moving to 100 to 200, so for the next 100 unit rupees, the difference amount which you are paying, let's say, so 100, no. Okay, so let me change it a bit. So rather than having, so I can tell it as 300, and this will be something like, let's say, 550, okay? So now, let's say for the next 100 units, you're now paying 125 rupees. So now your price changes from 1.5 to 1.25. Now as you are increasing from let's say 200 to 400 ml, so what has happened? So 200 to 400 ml you end up paying 500 rupees. So for the next 200 ml you are paying 200 rupees extra. So now your marginal willing to pay for the next 200 units has reduced from 1.25 to 1. So when you represent such a pricing strategy, so this is your average revenue curve, this is your marginal revenue curve, and let me tell you why this thing happens before going further into the graphical representation of this type of price discrimination, which is known as a second degree price discrimination. This can happen in a situation, you understand that this can happen in a situation where achieving some economies of scale. That means more you sell that quantity of that good, your marginal cost also falls as your economies of scale is expanding. So with increase in economies of scale, your marginal cost of producing that good falls, and in a way your average cost of producing that good also falls. So this happens when your production capacity is of a critical size. That means below which that production capacity cannot be reduced. So if you want to produce, you have to produce a minimum amount to have some economic economic operation or economically feasible operation of that particular production plant or the technology. So as you keep on increasing, the marginal cost keeps on falling, and hence the average cost also keeps on falling. So in that situation, it makes to price the subsequent blocks or units of output at a lower level. So this is what it has happened also in case of the shampoo. So what will happen is this: in that situation, rather than having continuously rising marginal cost curve and hence continuously rising average cost curve, we will be having a situation where your average cost also seems to be falling. That means you will operate at the lower part of the average cost curve, and hence your marginal cost curve is also falling in a similar way. So this is the top, this is average cost curve and this is your marginal cost curve. So usually what would have happened here in this way is this. So here your, let me just reiterate once again. So here your average cost curve is falling and hence your marginal cost curve is also falling. Okay, so this is average revenue, this is average cost, and this is your marginal cost. So what has happened typically, as I say, that in case of monopoly, keep this thing in your mind, in case of a normal monopoly situation, we produce at that point where your marginal cost curve intersects the marginal revenue curve from below. But now here we are actually encountering a situation where the marginal cost curve is actually intersecting the marginal revenue curve from above. So you can look at this situation. So the marginal cost curve is actually intersecting the marginal revenue curve from above rather than from below. So this is a situation where a marginal cost curve is continuously falling, whereas and hence your average cost is also continuously falling till it rises. So this is symptomatic of public utilities like electricity, where it has got where the electric power plants has got a critical capacity below which the production of power cannot fall or the generation of power cannot fall. You have got water treatment plants and many such examples, especially these situations encountered in case of public utilities. So in such a situation, what actually happens is this, that rather than charging a single price, we actually follow a block pricing. So in a block pricing, we actually vary the price charged for certain each block of subsequent blocks of output being sold or produced in the market. Now when you are doing that, let us see what has happened. So in case of normal monopoly, you would have operated at this situation. Okay, so this would have been your output and this would have been, let's say, your price, equilibrium price. Now what is happening is this, still now, so as I say that the average cost also is falling and your marginal cost is also falling. So drawing from the example of the first degree price discrimination, if I am willing to increase my production, that means I am willing to increase my production in such a way whereby I am also able to capture those consumers who may not be willing to pay price as high as P, but who may be willing to pay a price such that it covers not only my variable cost of production, but it will also be covering my average cost of production. So if it is covering my average cost of production, that means I am in a situation where I am in a no profit, no loss basis. But if it is something where it is covering more than my average cost of production, then at least I am making some profit. So here what will happen in case of, let's say, so this is, let's say, the first block which I produced, which is equal to OQ star. Now as you move from OQ star to, let's say, OQ prime, then you will end up producing Q star Q prime units of output, and you will be selling this Q star Q prime units of output not at P but now at a point something P1. Okay. Now as you move from Q1 prime to a place where the average cost curve is intersecting the average revenue curve, then corresponding to that point you produce Q star Q plus units of Q prime Q plus unit of output, and the price which we charge for the subsequent unit, for those subsequent units, that is Q prime Q plus, is equal to P2. Now P2 is the price which is equal to the average cost of producing that output, that is Q star unit, this last unit of output, which is Q plus. Now when you are doing that, you are able to cover just the cost of production. Now the argument would have been subsequently that rather than producing at that point, just in case of first degree price discrimination, we could also produce up to the point where the MC curve is intersecting the air curve. But you will see when you are, if you are produced at this point where MC curve is intersecting the air curve, it will not be able to cover all the cost of production, because here the average cost curve lies above the average revenue curve. That means you will be incurring some loss. Though you will be covering your variable cost of production, but you will not be able to cover your fixed cost of production, which is there. So you will be incurring a loss. But here at the point where the AC curve is intersecting the air curve, you are not only able to cover the variable cost of production, but you are also able to cover your fixed cost of production, and hence you will be at a situation of zero loss, zero profit. And any output that you produced lesser than Q plus, you will always be earning some amount of output that over and above your total cost of, or the average cost of production. So going by this, if you see here, so for each subsequent blocks, that is for the first block 0 to OQ star, I have charged a price P. Now as I move from OQ star to Q star Q prime, I am charging a price P1, and for the last block, that is from Q prime to Q plus, I am charging a price P2. So this is how the pricing happens when you are doing some sort of block pricing strategy, like in case of public utilities like electricity, water, gas, anything you pick up, I mean the pipeline gas. And also when you are trying to sell something, like in case of the shampoo example, where each subsequent unit of volume of output that you sell has a lower marginal price. That means, so let's say as I've shown here, that for the first 50 ml the marginal pricing will be 2 per ml. Now for the next 50 ml the marginal pricing drops to 1.5. For the subsequently for the next 100 ml the marginal price drops to 1.25, and for the subsequent 200 ml the marginal price drops to 1, which is exactly happening in case of block pricing as you move along the air curve. So this will be corresponding exactly equal to the marginal willingness to pay of the consumer, and you will be charging the subsequent blocks equal to that marginal willingness to pay. So the difference between the first degree price discrimination, second degree price discrimination only depends how you treat the unit of output that is being sold. In first degree price discrimination, you are considering each unit of output separately. Whereas in case of second degree price discrimination, you are considering a block of output, that is a certain quantity of output or certain volume of output, as a unit for consideration for fixing your price or for charging price to the consumers. Okay. Now moving next from first degree and second degree price discrimination to third degree price discrimination. So what is happening in case of third degree price discrimination? So let us consider a situation, let's say, where you can geographically segregate the market. So geographical segregation of the market happens in a situation like in case of power supply, or let's say in case of water supply, or let's say even in case of pipeline gas supply, where you can effectively segregate the market in terms of its geography. Why? Because you have got some means of supplying these services to the customers, either through a pipeline or through a wire, or let's say that is also applicable in case of broadband, wire-based broadband system, where you are able to segregate. Even you can segregate and market from one block to the next. Okay, so when that is happening, what is happening is that let's say we are considering two distinct localities. One locality is not economically well off, and another locality is pretty rich and quite affluent. Now each of these localities, of the residents in each of these localities, are consuming electricity for their purpose. Now as you can understand that the first locality which is not so well to do, or a poor locality, their marginal willingness to pay for power will be much less for each unit that is being sold compared to the affluent locality or the affluent society which has got more willingness to pay for each unit of electricity that is being sold. So technically speaking, both of these localities will have different average revenue schedule or marginal willingness to revenue or the marginal willingness to pay schedules, and hence they will, corresponding to each of these different air schedules or marginal willingness to pay schedules, they will also have different marginal revenue curves for each unit of output, for the same unit of output that is being sold in the market. In this case, let's say electricity, it can also be broadband, or it can also be water or the pipeline gas supply. Now once that is being done, we know that the output in a normal monopoly situation, as now these are two distinct markets, they are not the same market but they are two distinct markets. So the normal output will be sold only at that point where the marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So that means, let's say for market one or society one, the marginal revenue is equal to, let's say, MR1. So this will be equal to the marginal cost. Now there is only a single seller, so hence the marginal cost will be same for both the markets. So marginal revenue 1, that is marginal revenue for the first market, will be equal to the marginal cost. Only at that point the output will be sold to the first market. Then for the second market, it will be sold only at that point where the marginal revenue of the second market will be equal to the marginal cost of producing the output. Now we all know that as the average revenue is different, so in this case the average revenue for each unit of output is less than the average revenue for the second for the first market is less than that of the second market. So technically the marginal revenue 1 will always be less than marginal revenue 2 for each unit of output that is being sold in the market. But now they are being for equilibrium situation, they are being equalized. So now they are being equalized up to the point. So if you see here, okay, so here what is happening, as I said, that for the first market the equilibrium output will be produced up to that point where marginal revenue of that market will be equal to MC, that is marginal MR1 equal to MC. Similarly for the second market, the equilibrium output will be produced only up to that point where the marginal revenue of that market will be equal to the marginal cost of producing that output, that is MR2 equal to MC. Now we know that as in case of market 1, which is a market for the poor society, and that of market 2, which is the market for the affluent society, the average revenue curves are different, and hence the marginal revenue curves will also be different. Not only this, we know that for, let's say, for the same unit that is being sold in the market, that is, let's say for the first unit of output, the average revenue or the marginal willingness to pay by the customer will in market 1, which is that of the market for the poor society, will be less than that of the marginal willingness to pay by the consumer in the affluent society. So hence the marginal revenue for the same unit of output, for the same output, I mean the same first unit, or let's say for the second unit of output in market 1, that is the marginal revenue in market 1 will always be less than that of the marginal revenue in market 2. Now having said that, if we see at these two equilibrium conditions for two different markets, so we can see that they are equalizing against the same quantity or the same variable, which is the marginal cost, and for both these markets to be in equilibrium. So it should not be like that only one market is in equilibrium whereas the other market is not in equilibrium. So for both the markets to be in equilibrium, this equilibrium condition must be satisfied, that is MR1 equal to MR2 equal to MC. Now this question will be asked, as I've said just now, that the marginal revenue for the same unit of output, or for the same unit of output, that is the first unit, or let's say the second unit of output, will always be less in the first market compared to that of the second market. Then this question will be asked that how this two quantity can equalize each other and then both of them be equal to marginal cost. So if we look now graphically, let's say this is the average revenue curve for the market 1. Okay, so this is MR1, this is AR1. Now similarly, there is a average revenue curve, let's say. So there is now an average revenue curve for market 2. Okay. So this is MR2 and this is ER2. Fine. Now we have got the supplier and his representative marginal cost curve. Now how we will be able to derive, so how we will be able to derive the equilibrium condition. So for the let's say for the supplier, he will just see that what is his, so he will just see that what is let's say marginal revenue he is able to derive from both these markets. So for him, he will not be considering both these markets separately while fixing his price, but he will be considering both these markets together. That means rather than considering the separate the market demand curves or the average revenue curves for both these markets, he will consider the combined or some sort of a composite or a combined demand curve for both these markets, and hence the composite marginal revenue curve for both these markets. So what he will do, that for each unit of output he will now add up this, so he will now do this horizontal summation of this marginal revenue curves. So once he does the horizontal summation of this marginal revenue curves, what happens is this, now next he will be having an aggregate marginal revenue curve. So when he's having this aggregate marginal revenue curve, then so he is having now an aggregate marginal revenue curve. So how we draw this aggregate marginal revenue curve? So let us see how we will now end up horizontally summing up these two marginal revenue curves, that is MR1 and MR2. So if you are doing this horizontal summation, so at this point, so let's say at this point till it reaches the point, just a minute. So till it reaches the point, let's say E, the marginal, the aggregate marginal revenue curve or the summed up marginal revenue curve will be exactly equal to the marginal revenue curve for the second market. Now when it reaches this point E, let's say, then the horizontal summation will happen with respect to marginal revenue curve for market 1. So then your marginal revenue curve at this point, it will have a kink and it will keep on diverging. So now this will be my marginal revenue curve. So this is now my combined of the aggregate marginal revenue curve. So now we can see that it is intersecting the marginal cost curve at a point F. Okay. So this will be the aggregate output that will be produced for both these markets, which is equal to Q star. Now, as I said that at the equilibrium, the marginal revenue in market 1 should be equal to the marginal revenue in market 2, and then it should be equal to the marginal cost of producing that output. So you see now, if I am drawing a horizontal line from this point of intersection onto the intersecting the vertical axis at point, let's say P. Now when I do that, you will find that for marginal it is now here. So for here, so I am now setting effectively the price, that is MR equal to MC. So now I am effectively setting the price, that is MR equal to MC. Now what is happening is this, so this is the marginal revenue curve for market 1, so it is intersecting the MR curve for market 1 at point A, and the marginal revenue curve, that is an MR curve for market 2 at point B. Now corresponding to that, the output produced for market 1 is Q1 and for market 2 it is Q2. So now if you add up OQ1 and OQ2, you will get exactly the amount OQ star. Geometrically this is how it will come out. Now corresponding prices in market 1 and market 2 will be as follows. So for market 1, the corresponding price for OQ1 units of output will be P1 star, and for OQ2 units of output, the corresponding OQ2 units of output, the corresponding price in market 2 will be equal to P2 stock. So now you can see when you can geographically segregate to different markets, you can also charge different prices. So for each of these markets you will be charging the same price for all the units of output produced, but for different markets you will charge different prices for the output that is sold in those two markets that are segregated geographically. So this is what we have all about three different forms of price discrimination, that is first degree price discrimination, which is based on charging separate price for each unit of output produced. Second degree price discrimination, which is based on charging separate prices for different blocks of unit that is being produced. And third degree price discrimination, which is based on charging different prices for markets that are segregated geographically, but within the same market you will be charging same price for all the units of output that are being produced or sold. So thank you for listening to this class on on price discrimination, which is basically being used by monopoly for charging different prices so as to maximize its profit and to garner as much as consumer surplus possible and add to its profit margin or profit amount. So thank you for listening and hope you have been able to appreciate what has been discussed in the class.